Welcome to the webinar, Is Blind Recruiting Really as Gender Blind as It's Supposed to Be? Brought to you by Oleo, Intelligent Talent Acquisition Technology. Today's webinar will be presented by Jeanette Meister, Managing Director and Head of Americas at Oleo. Jeanette drives growth, product advancement, and helps clients leverage technology to transform their recruiting efforts. Prior to Oleo, Jeanette spent most of her career as a recruiting practitioner, holding leadership roles at Credit Suisse, Lehman Brothers, IBM, and Gartner. She's a graduate of Washington University in St. Louis with an MBA in management from Columbia Business School. She was recognized as a 2018 IT Woman of the Year finalist, and she also received the Stevie Silver Award in 2017 for Female Executive of the Year. Also in 2017, a Smart CEO Brava Award. Before we jump in and I turn it over to Jeanette, I just want to let everyone know that all attendees are muted. So if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box and we'll answer as many as we can at the end as time allows. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeanette.
Thank you so much. Well, we're excited to be here today on this gorgeous summer day. And today we're going to talk about, is blind recruiting really as gender blind as it's supposed to be? And this is a special session for those who were at the NACE conference but couldn't make it to this session. So I'm excited to be doing a webinar of it for those who couldn't make it or those who might not be at the NACE conference. So let's dive into it. And I'll advance my slide. Okay, so I thought I would just quickly start off. Some people are like, Oleo, wait a second, Jeanette, I thought you worked for WCN. And well, you're right. So Oleo is formerly WCN. Right around NACE in June, we did a rebrand and name change. And we did it because what actually happened was we felt like we really had outgrown our name and what we were doing. We just outgrew it. In 1995, we started WCN, which stood for World Careers Network, and the idea was to help organizations and talent just simply find each other at high volumes. But what happened over the past 20 plus years is that we not only do that, but we also help organizations attract, engage, and hire the right diverse talent through intelligent automation and machine learning. So we felt like it was time for us to really, change our name, change our brand, like be who we really are. So we let our identity catch up with who we are. And for those who are wondering, what's Oleo mean? It means a diverse collection of things that together create something beautiful. And that's really how we see ourselves, a diverse collection of a diverse team of talent acquisition professionals and technology professionals, and we come together to achieve something awesome. So that's a lot about Oleo, and I just wanted to level set that if you're wondering. And just quickly what we do, I talked a bit about machine learning and intelligent automation. We break that down into real three areas: intelligent attraction, engagement, and selection. And so that runs through everything we do. And we have products and technology across the entire recruiting end-to-end process, from a CRM to an ATS to interview management, managing events, managing programs like our interns over the summer, and then of course mobility, talent mobility. So again, quick dip into what we do, just in case you're like, wait, I know WCN, but I sort of forget. Well, now we're Oleo, and again, quick reminder what we do. So enough about Oleo. Let's just take a minute. And I just thought, Melissa did a great intro on me, so I head up the Americas. But really, I come to you today because I've been in your shoes, at least the women on the call and webinar who wear shoes, and maybe some men too. So, before joining Oleo 5 years ago, I was the Global Chief Operating Officer at Credit Suisse for campus recruiting. And before that, I was at Lehman and others. So I've really been in, recruiting roles for certainly over a decade. I won't tell you how many years because then you'll know how old I am. But I wear my hat today as I come to you with this presentation. So hopefully that is helpful. I want to take a minute and just talk about diversity and really diverse thinking. So I'm sure many of you on the webinar have you've read the studies. There's lots of articles out there. Diverse teams are 400 times more effective than teams who have the same experiences. McKinsey did a study that said leadership teams that are more gender diverse are more productive and innovative. And we can point to a million different studies, but the bottom line is the more diverse your teams are, the more effective you will be, and organizations will be. And so, when we think about that, and I also think about what the future holds and where we're at, is the future is absolutely diverse. These are just facts. Millennials who dominate the workforce today are more diverse than previous generations, and Generation Z are even more diverse still. So those are, students that are in college, they're Gen Z, and they're about to, depending on where you think Gen Z starts and ends, they're about to hit the workforce. And the interesting thing about Generation Z is they eclipse all other generations when it comes to embracing diversity. They have more friends of different races, sexual orientation. In fact, 81% of Generation Z have one or more friends who are a different race. That's very different than if you look at the stats for baby boomers, for example. Generation Z are also the most likely of all generations to say they have friends of a different sexual orientation. It's actually 59%. So the future is diverse. But here's the thing. Little Star Wars reference here for those Star Wars fans, and I apologize to the Star Trek fans. The reality is that most organizations right now are unprepared, and they continue to treat recruiting like they always have been. So let's think about Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, we know they're one of the most dynamic, forward-thinking cultures. And we know that, and we see that, and we live and breathe it with every technology that we're using. Certainly in day to day. And leaders are always talking about the need to increase diversity for business and also social reasons as well. But we know that all the bread and butter tech jobs are dominated by white men. So things are not changing as fast as we'd like them to. Some interesting things. Harvard Business Review did a study and published an article that U.S. commercial banks white women representation has dropped from 39% to 35%. That was just published this year. So not ideal. And in this same article, Harvard Business Review also said that there is, in their study, there was a 9% decrease in Black women at the management level when diversity training is rolled out. So, what's happening now is things aren't working now, and point is it's not going to work as well in the future as the future is becoming more diverse. So it's really important for us to, when we think about our recruiting strategies, to stop checking the boxes. We know we're slow to change. Change takes a while. It's tough to get out of our comfort zone. And sometimes we just don't know how to do things differently, or we don't have the right tools. And identifying great talent really tends to equate to recruiting the best talent that mimics our top performers. And going to the same sources to recruit from that we're used to. And at times, unfortunately, applying the same unconscious biases and doing the same thing. And so it's something we have to really think about. And a lot of times, diversity and diversity recruiting is just as like a bolt-on. It's like an extra thing we have to do. It's a compliance thing. Might have like a small team, but it's not. It's not pervasive across all of what we're doing in recruiting. It's just a little piece of it. And so the issue is that that's not where the magic is going to happen if we just have little pieces. We need to, make it not just a program, but make sure diversity and diversified thinking is part of the strategy of recruiting. And so thinking about that, and I talked about before, the power to make a positive impact in the world and being more impactful is when you have great, diverse teams of people with different skills and the right skills and shared motivations. And if you put people in the right jobs at the right time, well, my gosh, think about the impact we can have there. It's really impactful. But here's my question to everyone, and it is a bit of a rhetorical question, is how are we determining who the right people are? How do we do it? And, is it the past work experience? Is it their school? Is it their GPA? If we're thinking about, campus recruiting, is it what is it? So let's just think about that for a second. And let's talk about the voice, because I can't have a presentation without some sort of pop culture reference. So think about the voice. The voice is, the judges don't see who's singing. They come out, the judges are turned around, they just listen, they just hear. And if they like them, then they press a button and spin around. And so many times we've seen that expression where there's that just surprise of, wow, I can't believe that incredible voice came out of that person, for whatever, thoughts it were. And it's completely blind, and it's really powerful. And it also is, a fantastic show to watch. So think about that. And that's a way to really make, blind screening, really doing it in a great way. But many of you might not know that this sort of blind screening, blind hiring actually started with orchestras. So in the 1970s, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson here. So we're going to go back to the 70s. Symphony orchestras were actually made up exclusively of white men. And the directors at that time said that they were the only ones who were qualified. So it sounds a little familiar if we think about, let's say, tech jobs now. But I digress. So interestingly is around that time in the 70s, they started to have blind auditions. And what they started to do, some orchestras started to do, is musicians would audition behind the curtains, behind screens. So the judges could not see what they looked like. And the other thing they did was they actually put carpeted floors down. So you couldn't hear women's, heels clacking on the floor, because at the time women mostly wore heels. And so they made it completely blind screening. And interestingly, just side note, I have the Boston Symphony Orchestra. They pioneered this practice in 1952, and it actually came about because around that time there was a very high-profile racial discrimination case brought by two Black musicians, and so interestingly. So again, just sort of a history lesson of where this started. So people started doing this. Then researchers from Harvard and Princeton took notice of this new way of these auditions. And here's what they found. And this is going to amaze you. Okay? Or maybe not. 25 to 45% likelihood that women would be hired when they did the blind screening, which is a huge number. So the likelihood that females would be hired increased significantly. And in fact, women actually became slightly more likely to be hired than men when they instituted this. So again, a completely blind screening process really leveled the playing field. And here's the other interesting thing that happened at the time. Women knew that they would be treated fairly, so they actually started applying to be part of the orchestra in more numbers than they had in the past, which to me is really amazing because, if they figured before they didn't really have a shot because only men were being hired, they just didn't even bother to apply to be part of the orchestra. Then they realized, hey, I have a fighting shot. So you think about like the practice and the what you do from a recruiting standpoint, just the way and you run your process you can increase diversity if people realize, hey, you've really leveled the playing field. So I think that's really, really an impactful story. So a history lesson is done, but I do have some more studies to talk to you about. I want to talk about names for just a few minutes. And names, and we know this, names have an impact. So there was a landmark study done in 2003 by MIT in Chicago. And what the researchers did was they made up fake names. Fake resumes, fake names. And half of the resumes had Black-sounding names. Lakeisha Washington and Jamel Jones were on the Black-sounding name resumes. And the white-sounding resumes, the other half, they used Emily Walsh and Greg Baker. And those, as you can see the stat on my slide here, those who had white-sounding names, 50% more likely to be called back for an interview than those with Black-sounding names. So names have an impact. Not surprising. I think a lot of us have heard that. But here's an interesting, there is a follow-up study in 2015, so much more recently, to see where things were. And they wanted to see if there was a difference with candidates that had Black sounding names from elite universities versus white sounding names from less selective schools. Now, I don't want to get into the whole, piece on like elite universities, are those better or worse, and less selective schools, because we all know there's fantastic students and candidates at all schools and all universities regardless. So let's just put that aside. But interestingly, this is what the results were. Let's see. Black sounding names were called back at the same rate if you're at an elite university as white sounding names at less selective schools. So said another way, if you wanted to have the same shot of getting an interview, a candidate who was Black or had a Black sounding name who was at a top university like had an equal shot as someone who was at a less selective school who was white. So you can imagine it's surprising when you see the studies. And interestingly, other recent studies have found that applicants who are Muslims, ex-offenders, mothers, disabled, or even gay are also less likely to be called back. And this is even when MIT and Chicago did this research, it's even if the employers swear that they want a diverse workforce and they believe they're doing everything in their power to create one. So names have a huge impact, and our unintentional biases do as well. So here's what some organizations that we work with and we talk to do. Take the resume and remove things. Remove name, maybe nationality, maybe university, and the goal is to judge on merit. And so that's been going on a fair amount. So I'm curious, if we go to everyone in the group, I'm curious if anyone on the webinar is doing any anonymous screening like this. Are you removing the name when you select who you're going to interview, or like look through the resumes to decide who you're going to interview? Are you doing anything like that? So we'll just take a minute. The poll is open and it says yes or no. It's a simple thing, and hopefully no one's in like the middle of maybe. So we'll just take a minute, see if we can get a majority of you to respond. So we will see. And I've done this this poll. As I said earlier, I did this at the NACE conference. I've done this a couple other times as well. So I'm curious to see if those on the webinar have similar results. Okay, so it looks like everyone's in. We're going to close the poll down. Okay, hold on.
Uh-oh.
Let me just reach. There we go. Okay. So interestingly, there was no one on the webinar who said they're doing anonymous screening. And this actually isn't surprising, because I know people on this webinar are mostly US based. So it is not common in the US to do this anonymous screening and hide the name. It's much more common in Europe and Asia. So I'm not surprised to hear that there's no one doing this yet. So it's definitely started. People are starting to do this. But as I just demonstrated, names have an impact. So there's a piece where it helps to do that. But my question, next thing we started thinking about, is like, what about language? So we know that, okay, you could hide the names, and that might help with some stuff because names have an impact if you're more likely to be selected for an interview. But what about language? Is there anything in the way words are phrased or said that have an impact? So let's talk a little bit more about words and not names. So the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology did some big studies, and what they did is they wanted to see if job description wording influenced how appealing jobs were to men versus women, and did it increase or decrease gender inequality rather. And so in the end, just to quickly summarize what was published in this study, is that participants in this study, they were presented with a series of job ads. So think back in the day before we even had the internet, newspaper, we had printed advertisements, so a little bit less, different than it is today. And so some jobs were marketed and said that this job was, for a man, so a lineman, and male dominated, and it had words that said he needs to, be able to do this or that. And then there was some jobs that were unbiased. It made reference to both men and women as candidates. So again, it could be a traditional male job, but like at the time, a lineman, a foreman. But again, it didn't say he or she per se. And then there were some jobs that were posted that had the sex reversed. So it would be, referring to the foreman as she has would be able to, have this qualification or that qualification. So they did a few different buckets, if you will, and the results were really clear. Women were much more interested in male-dominated jobs when the ads were unbiased. And made reference to women and men as candidates than when the job just referenced male. So again, not surprising. So we've known about this for years. We've known about the stuff that words matter and job descriptions matter, certainly for over 40 years. But we still see some of this stuff going on nowadays. So I thought I would just take a couple minutes to talk about job descriptions. And ways you can help from a language standpoint, of making sure that you're keeping the playing field level and encouraging everyone to apply. So one thing you need to do, and you should be doing if you're not already, is gender neutral titles. So gender neutral titles and job descriptions. So sometimes male oriented titles can really inadvertently prevent women from clicking on your job. So words like guru and ninja and hacker actually at times are a turnoff to women. So using more descriptive neutral titles like engineer, project manager, development, like what it is, that you have a much more high likelihood of attracting women versus just men. The other thing is, I mentioned before in the studies, check your pronouns. If you're writing he or she, just use you as an example. So, that an example you could write: as a product manager for our company, you will be responsible for, versus saying, again, using he or she. So that, that should be pretty easy. Check your job descriptions that way. And, the other thing is, think about balancing of words. Avoid or balance your use of any gender charged words. So there's a great tool that was recently told about from a company called Textico. That's TEXTIO, and we have no partnership with them, but I just think it's great. And that what you can do is you can put in the job description, and it can show you where you might have some gender charged words that may turn off one gender or the other, and identify any problem spots. So avoiding aggressive language like crushing it is usually a good thing. It tends to be a turn off to women. And really, next piece is avoid using superlatives as well. Using the words like expert, superior, world class. Research has shown that women are much less likely than men to brag about their accomplishments. And superlatives related to a candidate's background limits the pool of female applicants, because could be very few female currently in leading positions at world-class firms, for example. So if you're saying you want to hire someone who's at a world-class firm, if there is an issue with people moving up the ranks and all other sort of gender issues out there, you don't want to turn off a pool of candidates by putting some of these words out there. And then finally, limit the number of requirements on your job description. So research has shown that women will not apply for jobs unless they meet 100% of the requirements. Men will apply for jobs if they meet 60% of the requirements, which is true. Research has shown that. So, as a recruiter, you should identify what are the nice to have requirements and what are the must have, and try putting the must haves and not the nice to haves, and see if it increases your applicant pool. So things to think about from the job description standpoint. So, I think, we've covered off a lot of, the job description, names and resumes, and certainly, we talked a lot about language on job description and the impact. But at Oleo, we also wanted to take time to understand what differences exist on resumes from a language standpoint. And then taking that a bit further, do these words then, increase any unconscious bias to recruiters? And then what about machine learning? So we're doing lots of stuff with machine learning. That was, one of the main reasons and the change, and we outgrew our name and did switch to Oleo. So, we wanted to understand all of the impacts there. So here's what we did. What we did was we partnered with University College London, and they have a fantastic data science program over there, cutting edge of the research. And we had great data from, working over 20 years as an applicant tracking system. We had tons and tons and tons of resumes. And so what we did in partnership with them was we actually conducted the first large-scale linguistic analysis of male and female resumes. And we did it across multiple industries. So we looked at 200,000 resumes in financial services, technology, consulting, and retail. So I'm going to share with you today some of our findings. And just quickly, our objective was to understand, what are the features, without getting too data sciencey on you, but what are the features that would differentiate a male resume from a female resume? That's for any big, data scientists, or you understand what this means. We looked at lexical, syntactical, and semantic differences in the text. So in case anyone has any questions, that's the three areas we looked at. And then again, we wanted to understand, can we identify what these features are that differentiate a male versus female resume, and then are they amplified in machine learning? Because when you're creating a machine that's learning and making decisions or recommendations, you don't want to make something that's something even worse. So here's what we found for each of the jobs in those industries. We were very it was night and day. We were able to say what the top 10 words for each gender that made a person or a machine know that this was a male or female resume, even if you took off the name. There were absolutely clear gender differences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you, before I get in, what these words were by these four industries. And this is, I was really blown away by it, having been in recruiting for so many years, seeing the differences by industry and the words that females use versus males. So let's get into, financial services. So financial services, top 10 words that makes a machine or person know that it's a female resume. So someone who's applying for a finance job. Words that are used on a female resume: social, volunteer, community, assistant, organize. Okay, these are great words, but you could say they're sort of softer words, again, when we're thinking about financial services. So let me show you the male top 10 words. Sort of mind-blowing. Equity, portfolio, investment, capital, stocks, finance. Very different words coming from men versus women applying to the same exact jobs. It is mind-blowing. One is very focused on, let's say what the job is about. So it was fascinating. So that's financial services. Give you a minute there to sort of look through. So what about other industries? Let's see. Next one. Technology. So we see the word assistant again. Assistant, social, volunteer, organize, event. So similar to the financial services female words. Male. Tech jobs. Well, there's a lot of tech here. C++, which are programming languages, software, developer, engineer, computer. I mean, it's just, to me, when I saw this, it was, again, just amazing information to see the vast differences. So let's see what happens when we go to consulting. Again, we're seeing the word organize, social, event, student, assistant from the female side. Again, very, very similar to the other two industries. And I'm sure you guys will probably guess what I'm going to show on the male ones. Engineering, investment, finance, technical, cost. I thought sport was an interesting one as well. But again, I mean, vast differences. It's just night and day. It's amazing to see. And now let's go to retail. And I think one interesting thing about retail is we think, oh, it's retail, buying, like maybe it'll be similar, right? It's not like it's a little bit different type of industry. So females, volunteer, shop. Okay, shop is like sort of maybe male in the sense that we saw from some of the earlier industries. Organize, social, child. So interesting. Let's see what the males had to say. Football, sport, business, computer, IT. That's IT, not it, by the way. So again, very, very, very different. Very, very, very different. It just, again, it was blown away. I think one interesting thing that I used to, from my, years ago when I was doing, I remember having a conversation with someone around sports, and someone showed me a resume of a candidate that they were played sports. I don't remember if it was like captain of whatever of the soccer team. And I said to that person, I said, sports is not a core competency. What is, at the time of the organization I was working on, is the ability to multitask and juggle. So this was a undergraduate type of role. So I'm like, if you're showing me a candidate that has an amazing GPA, and is also playing sports and putting in a ton of hours, that's interesting to me. But the sport alone is not a core competency. So I just thought that, like, that always, when I see these words for retail and buying of football and sport, it's just an interesting thing, and that's where my mind goes. But anyway, you can see the vast differences in all four of these industries with the words. Again, it's just mind blowing. So we're really, I was happy to be able to share this information with you. And here's the interesting thing about all of these words I just shared. They're nouns. So anyone who is an English major, nouns play a big role in differentiating the male and female resumes. 90% of those top male discriminant words were nouns, proper nouns and nouns. And only 68% of the female words were proper nouns and nouns. So the nouns are what makes you know if a resume is a male or female resume. The machine can figure it out. We can figure it out as human beings. We know that probably instinctively, but until we actually see the data laid out like this, it's a huge difference. It's all about nouns. And then beyond nouns, what we found in our study is that there were other patterns that really led to easy gender identification. The resume length was also an interesting pattern that we saw. Female candidate resumes tend to be longer and use more unique words. So that was another thing we could tell the difference between male and female resumes. Readability was also a difference between male and female resumes. Interestingly, for financial services, I like technology and consulting. The difference was about 10 non-unique words. Or 5 unique words or more, and it was even more so, a higher number for retail and buying in terms of the use of certain words. So there was, again, other things beside the nouns were the big thing, but there were other patterns, and all of this together led to be like, it was statistically significant differences. So I think the interesting thing here is, having, knowing this information is just so key, because as humans, we look at a resume, and even if you black out the name, again, there's the words. We subconsciously will know if it's a female or male resume. When we put this information through our machine learning algorithm, our algorithm, and remove the name, was able to predict with over 99% certainty if a resume was male or female. And so again, we as humans, do the same thing. So the key thing here is we did all this research and we did all this study because it was really important for us at Oleo to really remove remove the bias and unleash, unleash the potential. So I put a picture up from NACE, since this was a recap from NACE, and this is our customer, Allison from Express Scripts at our booth. And I like that it says in the background, remove bias and unleash your potential. But, if we talk about, it's about resetting for us. If you can, remove the bias from your process, then you can just get amazing, fantastic candidates that maybe you were overlooking before or that weren't part of your recruiting pool. And that's the whole piece around unleashing your potential. So, there's a few ways to do it. It's about changing your process and what you're doing. But it's also, technology can really make a difference and remove the bias. And that's, really, a big piece of what we're doing at Oleo. And we really believe that, intelligent automation. So if you can automate a way of, if we take in this case, removing gender bias from your screening process, that one frees up your time and then allows us as recruiters to get back to being human and having the conversations and talking with our candidates and, talking with those top candidates and not overlooking those who we didn't mean to overlook, because in the end it comes down to algorithms and machine learning. They're faster, and then they can be smarter than us. And so what we did, and I'll show you an example of all the research and work we did was the ability now to be able to completely pull out any gender from a resume and have it analyzed by an algorithm. This is what our customers say. So log into a system, here's a list of candidates, and there's a recommendation. 5-star candidates are amazing. Those are the ones you absolutely want to interview, and 1-star not as much. And so it looks really, really simple. But I use this as an example because there's so much more that goes into a prescriptive recommendation on who would be a great candidate to interview than meets the eye. It's not, it's based on, really hardcore data science and research to figure out, hey, it's nouns. It's these keyword nouns that makes, a machine or a person know if a resume is a male or female. And, even if you don't, it does not screaming out, male or female. So let's remove that out and then come up with a really great recommendation that's completely gender blind. And so that's what we did. And this was the outcome of that, where we have this prescriptive recommendation that helps to select fantastic candidates. We look at 120 data points, it scores, it prioritizes it, it's done through the machine learning, and then it gives us fantastic prescriptive recommendation. And so again, I show this because again, it looks simple, but there's a lot that goes into it. So, the big thing I just want everyone to leave today's webinar with, it's really about the more you know. And so I like this one because NBC Universal is one of our customers, and we all grew up seeing the more you know things at the end of the TV shows. And for me, I feel like the more you know now that language and certain nouns have an impact. Now that when you're looking at resumes, you're aware, be more aware of, unintentional bias you might have when you're looking at resumes. Be more aware of your job titles, and certainly be more aware of the names on resumes and possibly covering them over as well. So just, the more you know, be aware. I think that's a great first step. And for those who are ready to take further steps, you have us ready, standing by to give you our prescriptive recommendations in a real, true, gender blind, neutral way. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. And if there's any questions on the line, I'd be happy to answer them. I think you can just put it in the little chat box there and type that up. Otherwise, you can absolutely reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn, or you can find lots more information at oleo.com. So all of my contact details are there. So I'll give you guys a minute. I know I covered a lot, so we'll see. Let's see if there's anything coming in. Okay. Oh, it looks like we got one question that's coming in. Someone is asking if they could see the full study that this was based on. Yes, I'd be happy to send it to you. Just a word of warning. I'm not even exaggerating. It's a 98-page document that has a lot of like calculus and intense PhD, master's data science. So if you're interested in that, absolutely. I can see your name there. If anyone else is interested in receiving a copy of this study, again, it's long and dense, but you're more than welcome to it. You can just send me a message on LinkedIn or tweet at me or send me a private message or whatnot. I'm happy to send that out for your reading pleasure. So with that, let's see, anything else? Okay, well, we are here as a resource. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for joining. We will provide a recording of today's webinar via email. And to learn more about us, make sure you visit us at oleo.com or in social media. Thank you so much.